Hello and welcome to Inside Tennessee Football's practice facility. I'm Ryan Sylvia. This is Noah Taylor. We are with VolReport.com on the Rivals Network. And just this last Saturday, Tennessee took Tuscaloosa and fell short against Alabama despite a 13-point lead at the halftime break. And now they're preparing to head to Lexington, back-to-back road games in the SEC to face Kentucky. So we spoke with Josh Heupel today and three players, tight end McCall and Castles, and defensive lineman Elijah Simmons, and defensive back Danico Slaughter. So let's talk about what they had to say. Big pivotal moment in the Alabama game, though. Right out of half, Alabama scores on two plays. Tennessee gets the kickoff from that, and it's whistled down at, I believe they marked it at the 4-yard line because in a fair catch from someone on the front line ended up being a penalty. Heupel talked about that today. What do you have to say?
Yeah, and you're right. A very pivotal moment. It changes kind of what Tennessee probably wanted to do there, backed up to their own end zone. But he was asked about it today and kind of what happened there, who did it. I think we were all maybe a little unclear of who called the fair catch on that play. He didn't say who did it, but he said looking back on it, there was a player on the front line who raised his hand above his shoulder pad. And Heupel said that's the rule on a fair catch call. He's not coached to do that. Not really sure why he did it, but it was a pivotal moment in the game. Part of plenty of pivotal moments that led to that Alabama second half, which, obviously 27 unanswered points in that game, but really critical for Tennessee there because, again, it changes the way your offense can play and probably had to be a little bit less aggressive on that drive for Tennessee. So giving a little bit of insight on a moment in the game, I think people had a lot of questions about, but Josh Heupel kind of pointed it out that somebody on the front line called a fair catch they shouldn't have, and it kind of led to that stretch there for Tennessee.
Yeah, and that ends up being a really pivotal third quarter that played a part into. They, I believe, kicked a field goal off of that now shorter field position and ended up putting more points in that quarter. He was asked about, you're kind of 2 quarters away where if you stop the bleeding in those quarters, you're probably a 7-0 football team right now when thinking back to the second quarter against Florida and the third quarter against Alabama. And so Heupel was asked about that what's the takeaway when if you could clean up 2 quarters, you're probably an undefeated team right now? And he said, welcome to college football. There's a very thin margin of error that you need to balance on, and it's really tough because just like that, you play a couple bad drives in a row and next thing you know, you're down 14 points. So it'll be interesting for Tennessee with both of those coming on the road. Now they go to Lexington and they play in another road environment, and they have to deal with that and hope that they can play 60 solid minutes of football, or else a similar thing could happen where at halftime, I think a lot of people felt like Tennessee had that game wrapped up, and next thing you know, you're in a big hole that you weren't able to scrape out of. But on the player front, McCall Castles, big touchdown catch for him in the game against Alabama right before half. What are your takeaways from what he had to say?
Yeah, it was just kind of a continuation of Tennessee's tight ends having a really good year. They've been, in a season where the passing game has kind of not been up to par, not been what it was last year especially. The tight ends have been pretty consistent. With his touchdown in that game on Saturday in the first half, Tennessee's had a tight end score a touchdown in every game. They nearly had 2 with Jacob Warren in the back of the end zone in the first quarter, a little bit over his head there. But they've been really good, and I asked McCall Castles what's kind of led to that success. I thought his answer was interesting in that we don't get to work with the quarterbacks as much as the receivers do, so when we're on the field, we feel like we want to make the most of when the ball comes our way. They've certainly done that there. They've been a big part of it, and they were on Saturday with McCall Castles. Not only having that touchdown, he had another big play in that game too, I think, with a first down pickup there as well. So they've played really well to this point.
I think you got to be pretty satisfied about how those 2 veteran tight ends have done, and now with them out of eligibility, you have Ethan Davis too next year, who is able to learn from these 2 veterans, which I think could go a long way for his development, as he will probably be asked to be that tight end number 1 next year. On the defensive side, looking at the Kentucky game, we were able to talk with Elijah Simmons, and while facing a running quarterback in Jalen Milroe, all we heard last week was you got to keep your gap integrity, you have to stay in your lane, make sure that these holes don't open up. Well, Kentucky's run game is really good as well. Ray Davis, one of the best, if not the best, running back in the SEC to this point. Tennessee's going to have their hands full, and Elijah Simmons kind of echoed those statements from last week over this week as well, where we have to make sure that we're clogging these holes and we get a good stop up front as the defensive line unit to make sure that he's not able to run free, because he's one of those guys that when he's in open space, he can do a lot of damage. So that'll be something to look out for. Not a mobile quarterback like Jalen Milroe, but a run game that has been really effective for Kentucky, that if Tennessee wants to go in and win that game, they are going to have to stop that. But that'll do it all from us here today. We will be back here tomorrow as well to talk with some assistant coaches and players. Later today, the Lady Vols will have their media day, so there will be content from that. And then on Wednesday, the men's team will also meet with the media. So kind of the big three sports right now in this season are kind of coming to a front with the basketball season starting in a couple weeks and football season in full swing. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Head over to VolReport.com to not miss a thing about Tennessee athletics. Links to everything you need is in the description. And thank you for watching.